Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to News Dose. And if you had a hard enough time getting your shiny new toy, the PlayStation 5 or the Xbox Series X, well, what if I told you that the cycle is about ready to reset? Yeah, a new report is pointing to a new PlayStation 5 console with beefier specs, and it's expected maybe sooner than what you might think. So we're going to get into all that today, as well as Microsoft committing to a more broad third-party approach with Activision Blizzard to further convince these regulators that they actually are indeed the good guy that they've been claiming all along. Before we get into that though, do hit those buttons below, like, subscribe, and ring that bell as hard as you possibly can. That way you can stay up to date with all the daily gaming news. With that said though, we do actually have a lot to get into. Do keep those timestamps in mind, but yeah. Without further ado, let's just go and jump right into it, starting off with Bayonetta Origins. Bayonetta Origins is set to release on March 17th, and I kind of feel like since this game was announced, there's been a lot of skepticism. Not necessarily because it looks like a bad game per se. On the contrary, I think it looks quite interesting. It's got a beautiful art style to it, just absolutely gorgeous. But at the same time, the price has kind of turned some people away from this game. It's kind of unfortunate, really, as I personally love the Bayonetta series myself, but it's almost as if Platinum Games decided, hey, here we have this niche series that's found a moderate amount of success, but let's just go ahead and make it an even more niche game with a spin-off, all while keeping it at that full-fledged $60 price point. I feel like that really has been the mistake with this game thus far, but the good news here is that it does in fact sound like it's a worthy addition to the series. It is reviewing relatively well with an 80 overall score on Metacritic as of this recording. Reviewers are painting it as a wonderful spin-off that adds more to Cereza's overall character and backstory, all while being a fun game on its own, even if dramatically different from the mainline series. You do control two different characters at once, solve puzzles, and partake on a beautiful storybook adventure. Again, I understand that the price has been a sticking point with some fans out there, but at the same time, it does sound like it's a good game overall, and that might turn the tides back in its favor. Now, however, there's also a free demo that you can play on the eShop right now if you're still on the fence, but otherwise, if you're a Bayonetta fan, you might want to check out Bayonetta Origins when it releases on March 17th. Now, we also got some news for Atomic Heart. This game released last month, including a day one Xbox Game Pass release. You just kind of love it, and it was generally well received. While it has received some criticism for its narrative and dialogue, at the same time, it's still a fun game, and its world design and atmosphere are something to truly behold here, which is something that you can actually build on going forward. And that's exactly what it sounds like they plan to do. Reportedly, in an interview, Munfish was asked about a potential sequel, in which they responded, "It's too early to talk about a sequel," but they also reassured fans that Atomic Heart 2 is already planned for development. So there you go. If you enjoyed your time with Atomic Heart, do look forward to a sequel. For the time being, however, they're busy working on DLC, so don't expect this to come anytime soon. This one might ultimately take a while. I believe it took the first game about 5 years to make or something like that, so Atomic Heart 2 might be slated for 2028 or even beyond that, but just knowing how ambitious the first game was, and with them now receiving feedback on how to improve going forward, it'll be very interesting to see how the sequel will play out. Now, actually, speaking of 2028 or beyond, according to a new report by Insider Gaming's Tom Henderson, the PlayStation 6 is unlikely to release until at least 2028, which more or less puts the PlayStation 5's life cycle in line with the previous console generations. I don't think that that's really overly surprising. However, according to this same report, the PlayStation 5 generation will play out very similar to their approach with the PlayStation 4. In other words, a mid-generation refresh, a PlayStation 5 Pro, if you will, is indeed being planned. And actually, it might be a lot closer than what you would expect. We can actually just go ahead and take a look at the report here, which reads, Insider Gaming sources have confirmed that the PlayStation 5 Pro is in development and could release with a tentative release date of late 2024. Insider Gaming previously reported that a new PlayStation 5 with a detachable disc drive is scheduled to release later this year. It's understood that this new model will phase out the current PlayStation 5 to cut down on production and shipping costs. In spite of the widespread reports, this is not the PlayStation 5 Pro model. This is, quote-unquote, just the beginning of new hardware coming to PlayStation users this generation, said one source when talking about the detachable disc drive console. As for what the PlayStation 5 specs will entail, details are limited. However, a recently published patent by PlayStation architect Mark Cerny suggests that Sony Interactive Entertainment is looking to accelerate ray tracing performance in video games. So yeah, there's a lot happening in this report, which basically points to two completely different PlayStation 5 consoles that are planned to release over the next 2 years. The first of which is a new PlayStation 5 with a detachable disc drive. We heard about this console previously, and supposedly it's coming later this year, so nothing really too new there. But however, this PlayStation 5 Pro, on the other hand, this is where things get really interesting. It appears Sony, at the very least, is looking to improve ray tracing with this upgraded PlayStation 5 model, which, I mean, if you think about it, that does kind of make sense. Back in 2019, when we first started to hear about the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5, we heard a lot about ray tracing, 4K resolution, 60 frames per second, and blazingly fast load times with NVMe solid-state drives. Those were your 4 big improvements for this generation of consoles. But outside of the fast load times, the other 3 are dependent on one another. More often than not, you can't have all 3 of these things at the same time. Players have to choose between performance or graphical fidelity, and because of that, ray tracing seems to be used the least amount. The problem is that ray tracing is incredibly demanding, and it seems like most players prefer performance over ray tracing enhancements. So that's kind of where a mid-generation refresh with the idea of improving ray tracing could theoretically come in. I think that part does make sense. Now, I'm sure they'll look to make other improvements as well. I'm sure this is not going to be the only thing, but I think the bigger question here for gamers just kind of comes down to the timing of all this. I feel like most of us kind of expected mid-generation refresh eventually. I'm sure Xbox is working on one as well. We just haven't heard about it yet. The Xbox Series Z or whatever they want to call it. But I feel like this generation has just played out a lot different than last. Last generation, with all the improvements that TVs were making at the time, with 4K resolution becoming more easily accessible, there was HDR and things like that. Pro models made sense for fans who had recently bought a new 4K TV, especially with the Xbox One, which was sorely lacking in that original model. I mean, that thing didn't even have HDR capability. So there was that, but also the fact that the original consoles were able to, actually go down in price over time. Meanwhile, with the PlayStation 5, here we are in 2023, and prices are going up, not down. Now, to be fair, a lot could still change before late 2024 with the Pro model's reported planned release, but as things currently stand, you have to kind of wonder what price they're aiming for here. Is this going to be one of the more premium-priced mainline consoles that we've ever seen? Also, the other thing that I know a lot of fans question right now is that it doesn't even really feel like the current consoles have been all that utilized. I mean, the PlayStation 4 is still widely supported to this day, and we haven't even really seen Unreal Engine 5 yet. So yeah, I do think that there's some skepticism regarding mid-generation refreshes, at least this soon in a generation. Again though, late 2024 is still a little ways away. A lot of things can happen between now and then, and opinions might change by that time. But we'll talk about this a little more later on in the poll of the day, but I will say this much. I'm going to go ahead and keep an open mind here, because if they do come out with an improved model that gives games the capability of a true 4K resolution with a more consistent 60 frames per second with improved visual effects and maybe even some ray tracing, yeah, I could see that being worth it for some people out there. Now, that's not the only big story of the day, though, because Microsoft also made another move to convince regulators to approve the Activision Blizzard buyout. Of course, as we all kind of know by this point, they've had a lot of back and forth over the supposed foreclosure of Call of Duty. This is what Sony has tried to lead them to believe, but Microsoft has been very insistent, very, very insistent that that's just not true at all. In their words, they want to bring Call of Duty to more gamers, not less. Not only do they want to keep Call of Duty on PlayStation, which is fairly evident by this point, but more so they want to bring these games to other platforms as well. Now, the way they're trying to prove this to regulators is by entering contracts with different companies, ensuring they'll stay true to their word. So far, they've entered into a 10-year contract with both Nvidia and Nintendo to bring Call of Duty to 150 million more players worldwide. In Nvidia's case, this also includes Xbox games that are available on PC as well. Now, this does two different things. First off, it undermines Sony's argument for console gaming. Sony has continued to say how this is bad for gaming, bad for consumers, and bad for competition. But it's really kind of hard to argue against Microsoft when not only are they willing to negotiate with Sony themselves to keep Call of Duty on PlayStation, but on top of that, they've also got Nintendo on board as well. So both Sony's argument as well as regulators like the FTC, their arguments have kind of weakened with these contracts. Now, as for the Nvidia contract, though, this is just as important because it's aimed to alleviate regulators' concern that Microsoft will have too much of an advantage in terms of cloud game streaming, since they're offering the same games to their competitors. Well, the thing is they've continued to strengthen that stance today as they just reached yet another, yes, another 10-year agreement to bring Xbox PC games and Activision Blizzard titles such as Call of Duty over to Boosteroid's cloud streaming platform. Now, if you don't know what Boosteroid is, it's apparently the largest independent cloud gaming provider in the world, boasting a total of 4 million users globally. So just kind of go and add them to the list of big platform partners for the Xbox Activision Blizzard acquisition. Now you have Valve, Nintendo, Nvidia, and Boosteroid all actively rooting for the acquisition as it will directly benefit each of their platforms. And here's the thing, Microsoft isn't finished quite yet. They are staying on the aggressive here, as Microsoft's president Brad Smith did note today that more contracts are inbound in the coming weeks. Now, I imagine one of those contracts might include Amazon with their Luna cloud-based service, and that would be a monstrous announcement considering the size of Amazon. I think if anything, though, any kind of cloud concerns that these regulators supposedly had, yeah, they've kind of gone out the window. There's literally just no logical argument that could be made regarding Microsoft's foothold in cloud gaming when they're offering their games to other cloud platforms as well. And that's one of the big goals here. They did confirm today that no matter what happens, what these regulators decide, if they need to, they will fight for Activision Blizzard in court. And when you have all these contracts out there, it's going to be very, very difficult for these regulators to argue against that. Now, since we are on the topic of Activision Blizzard, though, we do have one last quick update to talk about, and that's for Diablo 4. Obviously, there's a lot of excitement for this game. That might be a little bit of an understatement, but Rod Ferguson felt it necessary to clear the air on their plans going forward, or in this case, what's not in their plans. As you can see here, he says, "It's awesome seeing the excitement around the Diablo 4 beta and our Wolfpack puppy. We've been getting some questions about D4 on Game Pass, and I want to let you know we have no plans for that. See you in Sanctuary during the beta early access weekend starting on March 17th. So, I mean, I guess there you have it. Diablo 4 is not coming to Xbox Game Pass day one, or at least for this moment. I mean, I hope everybody kind of understands the situation, but if Microsoft acquires Activision Blizzard before Diablo 4 releases, this could maybe change, but not knowing the status of what will happen with all that, I mean, anything could happen by this point. Diablo 4 is, as of this moment, not planned for Xbox Game Pass. Let's go take a look at the poll of the day, though, and since we talked about this earlier, I went ahead and asked you all, would you be interested in getting a mid-generation refresh with better specs for the Xbox Series or PlayStation 5? And as you can see here, 66% of you said no, while 27% of you said yes. Now, I guess there's actually two different ways of looking at that. With 27% of you saying yes, that means that a pretty good portion would actually be willing to buy a device like this. However, the majority is still in that no group, and I can also understand why. Like I said earlier, I think because we're still only in 2023, and especially with the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X not really being completely utilized yet, it's kind of like, yeah, we're still early in the generation. Why do we need a mid-generation refresh this early? But I mean, at the same time, there are ways to make something like this beneficial for a good group of people out there, and I think that's what you're kind of seeing here with 27% of you saying yes. It definitely shows you that there is a market for a device like this, and this is exactly why both PlayStation and Xbox, without a doubt, will more than likely release a mid-generation refresh at some point. And for that matter, like I said earlier, late 2024, that's still a little ways away, and a lot of things could change between now and then. Anyways, though, that's it for this episode. But if you liked the video, don't forget to bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.